I think that whatever is to be done will be done within the next few days, and has given me some ease. And what of you, my dear?
Oh, yes, I slept well, to the best of her lying ability.
Yeah, I think there's no facial expression, right? It's just, oh, good. Like, it's Cahill. He knows you're lying, but
Mm-hmm.
he also knows that you would never lie unless you had good reason to. So he accepts that for what it is. And probably towards the end there is the distinct look of sympathy, right? Because like you had a trying day yesterday, and in fact he probably reaches over and like clasps your hands in his, and he says, "Dove, understand that regardless of anything else going on, I am here. You need to speak of anything."
Yeah, I think she just squeezes his hands and just says, I am fully aware, but you are very busy. There's things to do. I am quite all right. She just gives him kind of her best winning smile.
Yeah, he's like, "There will always be things to do, but know that I hold you at high regard among these other things. But come, let us have breakfast. At least we can have one normal meal per day."
She just smiles and nods and gets up.
Yeah, and as you all proceed down into the dining area, because you're probably staying like in the temple, or at least in like a house or an estate close to the temple. And so it probably has a full kitchen and whatever, and you have a meal set before you. And I think that after last night's conversation, where it was like, these are things that we should do, there are people who are enacting orders throughout the military now to kind of get on that, or at least proceed down that path for what we need to do. So I want to talk to the kind of party as a whole now, and see if there were any specifics that you all were thinking of. Obviously, there is the talks of what I said earlier about like coming down off the walls and having, kind of surrounding them from all sides. And as I instructed, then one of the complications of that is the fact that the walls themselves, even though they look quite large, they're actually quite narrow. So moving a lot of troops that method would be hard. Also, you leave yourself exposed from the inside. So you know that there's plenty of archers and other things inside of the palace grounds themselves that would easily kind of be able to start picking you off. So like large troop movement is not going to work across the wall area. However, your idea, obviously, was to have a much smaller unit, perhaps a covert unit of just you guys, or just a couple of particular individuals that can move somewhat unseen, or at least quickly and swiftly, to avoid that particular weakness of the attempt. What it kind of boils down to is, what's the methodology here? Is it going to be a brute force? You don't have time to build a bunch of siege weapons, right? The walls aren't particularly high. I think I said last time they're like 12 feet or so high. So they're not necessarily scalable because they're all very like smooth stone. But they are, for most people achievable, at least to maybe have some grappling hooks and try and get them lodged in the top and climb your way over. And you have the advantage of numbers in this situation. There are far more of the army now than there is inside of the palace district. But that's not to say that they can't cause their own sorts of problems.
Is it possible to retcon slightly, and over the night we had some people making ladders?
Yeah,
Or I was
absolutely.
thinking
That
another thing that they could be doing is making shields, like large, not necessarily, because to stop arrows you don't really need much.
no, not at all.
So
just-
why don't they?
There's
could
plenty
do
of
something
debris where you can like lash them and nail them together to make barriers between you and archers and stuff.
So yeah, what I was thinking is one thing that could happen is that we have, the small force go in, but this time actually do what they're supposed to and open the door from the inside. And have them come over, have the army come from the astrology tower over to here and set up kind of like an embankment, like where they, set up these little makeshift walls to protect them from arrows.
Right, sure.
And wait for us to come down and open the doors.
Yeah, have some barricades that you could at least move in closer to the palace walls without being so exposed. Yeah, I think that is completely fair. Now, also, I will remind you, I should say, that assaulting the palace is not necessarily the next step you have to take. I'll remind you, over here in the Eastgate Nearmarkt district, I did describe that this is where the bulk of the resistance is fighting. So the resistance being the locals, right? Like the locals of Middenheim that were oppressed that are now fighting back. So there's quite a bit of enemy forces that have found their way into the tunnels underneath this district and are currently engaging guerrilla warfare with the resistance. So moving through this area might be particularly like scary. It might not be the swiftest, and you might come out a little bit of or you might sustain some losses trying to move through this place unopposed. But with what you said, obviously assaulting from the garden district or the garden areas over here is definitely one of the safest approaches to the palace. So, starting a campaign to that, I think I described it as well, though, that it's not easy to kind of rat people out of the tunnels. But it's certainly something that you can at least make an attempt at. Or at least make it a bit easier for you all to maneuver around. So, but I think that all of your suggestions, both the latter one and the shield/barricade one, are totally 100% valid. So I think that is 100% something that can occur. So perhaps, Farron, after you kind of get settled, get dressed, get back on Bernadette, you go visit like maybe the craftsmen that have been working right on overnight. Because while the soldiers would do that kind of thing, the advantage to having like a large moving army like this is that you have craftsmen that are kind of weaved within the ranks, right? And I think that there's plenty of debris, obviously, in the city from all of the crazy fighting and things that are blowing up and everything going on. That there can be a fair number of ladders that are big enough to kind of scale the walls and at least get on the top of them. Some even perhaps that have like hooks on them, right, to kind of latch on to the walls a little bit more sturdily. So as you're kind of, walking up and down the ranks inspecting that, I think that you encounter some of the bear riders who have found you again, right? You had kind of put them in charge of their own, but you encounter some of the bear riders who then approach you and say, Baron, it is good to see you again. I'm glad that you are unhurt. Perhaps we can discuss what the next plan is a bit further.
Yes. No doubt later this morning, us generals will get together and formulate a concrete plan for our presumed attack on the Palace district.
Yes, there is a concern that the men have. It has to do with the approaching army. If they were to scatter, it would cause significant concern for, well, not only the Empire, but Kislev as well. We are not equipped to handle a host of that size, maybe even attempting to head back north to their homelands. We would like to... Well... A bear rider never runs away, but there are other concerns here. Mainly that of our homeland. Bringing news to them is of importance.
Of course, I hear your concerns well. After the generals' meeting, and we have a plan, then I shall also give you orders to help support our fellow brothers up north.
Very well. I appreciate your time, General. We will see each other again.
Indeed. Thank you for speaking with me.
Yeah, and as they depart, perhaps it dawns on Farron that there's not only the current plight to worry about, right? It's what's the step after the next one. Let's say you take Middenheim and this great host of demons is scattered. Where do they go, right? Like, they don't just disappear. It becomes a huge, like, multi-year-long problem, perhaps, where the lands are... There's these roving bands of chaos again in the lands. So, giving Farron that little bit to chew on. Hannibal, it's your suggestion. Barricades are being made, at least transportable ones that will at least provide cover for soldiers that are moving to and from. Again, there's plenty of debris, plenty of doors that people can knock down at this point, because at this point it doesn't really matter. We need it to survive, not necessarily to keep infrastructure intact. So I think that you perhaps, as you're kind of walking by, going about your business, you see that these barricades are being set up, and I think that perhaps it is just post-breakfast time to gather everybody again in Cahill's dining area to speak of the next part of the plan. Now that everybody's kind of had a night to rest and sleep it off, so I think that all of you are invited. Obviously, you can choose whether or not you want to attend, and all of the council members are there: Lord Tenderfoot, Lady Tollsbeck. All of the other council members are there as well, and they are all participating in the discussion. And I think that for a while there is a lot of kind of discussion between everyone. There's no real asking questions and giving responses. So as you all are kind of gathered in there, what are the types of things that you talk about amongst each other, if you're there, or the other council members? You kind of have free reign to interact here. There's no structure to it. Okay, good. So with the ideas kind of in place for the barricades and the ladders, I think that the next step is probably Lord Tenderfoot then asks, kind of to the group, whoever wants to answer or step up. He probably says, I have a concern. It is mostly concerning how many soldiers we are to get above the walls. Fighting with so many in such a cramped area is just asking for more trouble. What types of units should be most well equipped for this? Heavily armored would at least help against some of the ranged weaponry, but easily maneuverable would be better for climbing ladders and such. I do like the plan, and he kind of looks at Farron when he says that, if you're there, Farron. And he's like, but certainly your bear riders would not be equipped to running up ladders. And kind of gives himself a little chuckle as he makes a joke that he thinks is funny.
We need a balance of everything. For those that can't climb the walls, we can have magic casters help.
But he does raise a valid concern. A large portion of our forces are cavalry based. So either we take some of the cavalry knights and have them dismount for the majority of the battle, or we come up with other means.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fair, Farron, because the soldiers that you do have that are foot soldiers are pretty generic. most of your specialty, like actually advanced and can fight units are all mounted, and they're obviously going to be far less effective off of their mounts. So yeah, it does raise, like, do you just throw waves of grunts at the walls? That's gonna be a lot of casualties, because they're not heavily equipped, armed or armored, and you know that the remaining forces inside of the palace district are probably the elites, right? They're probably the elites that you haven't really dealt with yet. You've been fighting grunts yourselves all the way up to this point. Actually, I can actually pull up kind of what the forces are here. Units, cool. Yeah, so some things that you have. You still have the veteran corps, which was participants in the previous battle, and that's the group that Morello was leading. You do have some lizardman cavalry, or some lizardman soldiers, lizardman foot soldiers, are still in existence for you. Another group that you have is, you do have some militia, like I said. You have the militia members, which are essentially townsfolk who might know how to use a bow or a sword that are there. And then the one other group that possibly might be interesting is you also have the larger corps of mercenaries. The people who were hired to follow the warband, essentially, as it moved north, right? Perhaps some of them are definitely probably like former bandits, right? Or former ne'er-do-wells, certainly, or the ruffians, I would call them. But you do have a fair amount of them, and they are probably, aside from the veteran soldiers, they're probably the most well-equipped and armored of the group. But they're also not a cohesive fighting unit, right? Like, they're not military trained. They're just good fighters.
Mm-hmm. If these are a bunch of bandit leaders or bandits, could we find a bandit leader and maybe ask him how he would try to assault this place?
Yeah, so there is definitely a lot of it's probably like a lot of small groups between maybe 5 and 30 men and women that are in these little bands, and they probably don't have a cohesive like unit leader. They're kind of just following in these little bands, and occasionally they join in and fight when they're needed. I think the last time they were utilized was when you were during the
they were used during the fight at Norska against the Norskins, right?
Yeah, so they've been a participant in, obviously, like the main assault on the Southgate, and obviously they were a participant in the Middenstag. That's what I was waiting for. That's what I was searching for, I should say. The Middenstag engagement, right, where you were ambushed by the undead. They fought valiantly during that, I would say, and probably earned some renown and some honor with the people, because that's kind of their preferred style of fighting. In fact, they fight very much kind of like the Resistance, right, where they're in these little kind of cliques that go around and probably know each other quite well, right? Like these little cliques of people probably know each other quite well and fight well with each other, but don't really know how to maneuver or use tactics. Some of them are probably more suited for ambushes even than an actual full-scale assault.
In that case, they're more suited to ambushes. We've been monitoring the Palace district, right?
Yeah, I would say you definitely have scouts and lookouts that are monitoring what's going on.
Have there been people going in and out?
So technically, yes. Technically the enemy forces still own the Nordgarten. That's the wrong tool. The Nordgarten and the Freiburg as well. So there are still enemy forces that kind of patrol and maneuver through those areas, as well as all the areas outside of the Palace district. These buildings are probably still in use to some degree, depending on what their actual use is. So yeah, I think that as of now, you understand that you're also being watched, but they are also watching you, or you are also watching them.
Is there any particular I'm just gonna call them bandits because you brought up that
Yeah.
thing. Is there any particular bandit that seemed more kind of like he was a bandit leader specifically? Like one, you said there's a bunch of small bands.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that seems to stick out, like giving orders to their small band?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a leader figure in most of these small groups, but if you want to find one that perhaps is particularly charismatic, right? Perhaps one that can become sort of a captain of perhaps a couple of different mercenary groups here, right?
Yeah, because what I'm thinking is that these guys are so scattered, it would be a really good force to have them put them under one person.
Okay, somebody that they can look up to and respect.
Yes.
Yeah,
someone
so
that's like them, because I doubt that they respect.
Right, they probably don't care what
lifestyle.
like anyone else would say, right? They're probably not going to listen to Morella, or even you, because you're a lapdog of the establishment.
Apparently, I would like
But
to
yeah,
see what establishment they think I'm a part of.
Yeah, I think that this is probably Hannibal. If you want to roll an insight check for me,
Okay.
to see if you can like locate some particularly influential leader.
Could I bring someone to help?
Yeah, absolutely.
can I
Who do you think is well suited to help you out with this?
Metagaming says Aelin, but I've been with Jericho a lot, so I would take him.
Okay, yeah, Jericho. You and Jericho have kind of grown this bromance. Also, Aelin might be good at wisdom, but has failed almost every single insight check she's ever rolled. I'm just throwing that out there.
I'm hypothetically supposed to be
Yeah.
good at insight checks.
I
I've never
am-
actually been good at them, though.
I am mathematically good at insight checks.
Correct.
It's not
Mhm.
actually. Yeah, Jericho would definitely go and help you out. What's your insight? Oh, his insight's a +10. So that's higher, right?
Yeah, so I'll help him.
Yeah, and I think that he having been a person who has lived kind of on the wrong side of the law / coin, and you're providing him with advantage on this, so 24. Look at that. So I think that yes. I think that as you know, Jericho perhaps he's not at this mission or not at this table right now, right? Maybe you sent him out previously, like, hey, maybe you foresaw the problem, Hannibal, right? And you're like, hey, let's see if we can find a good charismatic leader, right? And maybe Dane is with him. And as you're sitting at the table, I think that Jericho probably sends a message through Dane that says, you know, I've found an appropriate individual. He's in true Jericho fashion. He says he's probably a little rough around the edges, but no rougher than you, so should be fine. I think everything will be okay.
Then I would say to send him over, because if we plan on making him the leader, we need to include him in discussions like these.
Yeah, and so a few minutes perhaps pass again with this kind of talking amongst each other, around each other inside of the table, and I think that the door swings open, right, and everybody kind of falls quiet because it kind of like is kicked open almost. It gets thrown open, and you see this big hulking form of a man who steps in. He's probably got a bit of giant blood in him, if rumors were to be abound. His face is completely scarred, and he's wearing like a cut-off shirt. Has no armor, but has like just like a simple rope belt. He kind of looks like he's dressed almost like a seaman or a pirate. And he's got like a rope belt that hangs up or that holds up these just kind of tattered cloth pants. And you can see he's wearing these gloves that have these nasty spikes on them. And as he walks in, he holds the door out of the way as a young woman walks in. And she at her side has a sword with a very ornate handle and crossguard. And you can see that it is jeweled as well. And she wears quite a few earrings. She's very olive in complexion. Her hair is wild, black and curly as it falls down, probably to her mid-back area. And she's wearing like this colorful blouse that is laced up with this fine, almost golden in color string, or perhaps silk even. And as she walks in, she kind of takes stock of the room and like looks around, almost as if she's looking down her nose at everyone in there.
What's her name? Like, would Jericho told me her name?
No, he probably didn't. Because he probably was like, well, he didn't say he or her, right? He said, I found someone. But he probably said later, that, okay, I will send her to you. And, let me get a name for her, because I don't actually have one yet. She's a new character. It's a good song, by the way.
I don't know the song you're speaking of.
I searched. I forgot to put in the rest of my search. Oh yeah, this is a perfect name. Her name is Jocelyn Crutchley. That's her name.
Oh.
And as she walks in, you see this big, like, bulkish man that's holding the door open. She just turns around. She's like, "You can close it, Boris. It's fine." And she saunters over to the table, and I think that everyone at the table is kind of transfixed at this scene because nobody's probably ever seen this woman before. And this giant man Boris makes a presence all of his own, and he kind of positions himself next to the guards that are at the doors, and the guards are kind of just like looking at him like, who in the fuck is this guy, right? And as she saunters over the table, she walks over and she places a hand on the table, and she looks out over everyone and is kind of leaning on her arm, and her eyes lock with Cahill's, and she goes, "You wanted me?"
I did.
Yeah, and again, she kind of like, her eyes lazily kind of glance over at you, Hannibal. She says, "Yes, what is it?"
I want you to unify the mercenary group.
Ah! Fool's errand.
Fool's errand, but I'm sure you can do it.
Of course I can do it.
Then why won't you?
It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of money. Do you have coin? That is the true way to these mercenaries' hearts.
I kind of turn a glance at Cahill.
Yeah, and I think that as she looks back at Cahill, she goes, "And to mine." And Cahill kind of rests his hand, amused. He like, his gauntleted hand kind of like leans on his chin, amused, and he goes, "Yes, you will have what you want. Can you do it?" She probably steps back from the table and kind of walks around, and everybody's following her. And as she walks up to Cahill, she pulls off like this fingerless glove that she's wearing. She spits on her hand and just like holds it out to shake. And she says, "Whatever I want." Cahill like kind of regards it for a moment, but amused because he's curious about this whole situation. You see him pull off his gauntlet, kind of places it down on the table gently, and kind of spits on his own hand much more daintily than she did. And they shake hands on it.
Hannibal watches as Cahill makes this mistake.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But he has the entire Imperial treasury at his command, right? She'll be fine.
Yeah.
And also, if she's ne'er-do-well, he can just have her burnt at the stake later. So
Yeah, that's true.
Empire.
yeah, the most binding of all shakes. Yes. So as she kind of like tosses her hair, everything about her like jangles when she moves. It's almost as if there's like hidden bells or hidden like coins that are tucked in wherever they can be on her. And so she shakes Cahill's hand, and she nods and she says, "Very well, I will be going." And as she goes to leave, Boris, the big giant of a man, pulls open the door again. Before she leaves, she's resting her hand on the door frame, and she turns and she says, "We will be ready by sunset."
Good.
And she leaves, and kind of it takes a while for the room to return to its previous din, but eventually it does. And Kale like wipes his hand off on his tunic, and then like pulls his gauntlet back on. So you will have a mercenary captain to lead the forces into battle.
Yeah.
At the cost of probably quite a bit of gold and jewels.
We can literally make gold.
That's
True.
if they live. So.
Also, that's probably why Cahill wasn't too worried about it.
What Cahill doesn't know is that she's a named NPC.
She is a named NPC. It's true. True. And so is her henchman. So
Hannibal, you did kill off a character you met about a session ago, so...
Who'd I kill?
No, he's alive. He never died. I don't know what you're
He
talking about.
died and then came back because of it.
No, that never happened.
No, I don't have any idea what you're talking
all-
about.
He was alive the whole time.
It was an illusion that his head got chopped off.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Nothing happened. What are you talking about? You're crazy.
You're a lunatic. You're a madman.
Woman. Mad
God,
woman.
it feels like my birthday again.
Okay. I didn't. All right.
It's Jackson. You never make sense.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, just let me remind you that we should try to keep this battle with as few casualties as possible. Less just for moral regard, but also for battles ahead. For our battle shall not end once the city is recaptured. There is still the armies outside the walls that we must face and deal with.
Yeah, and I think the room takes on a more somber tone, as perhaps everyone kind of begins to think about what to do after this. Everybody's been so focused, as everybody has, on what to do about this current crisis, and not really regarding the next one. And I think that everybody nods in acceptance of that, but also is understanding that like we still have to overcome this crisis. And I think that Lady Tolsbeck like rests a hand on your shoulder, Farron, and says, "Yes, the plight of the surrounding areas will certainly be of the utmost concern once we have finished here. You have my word." And she kind of like knowingly gives you a look, almost as if she like understands what you're talking about there, as the representative of Kislev at the table, and also Lady Tolsbeck being a local lady, right? Like she's from the Middenheim area, so she understands like what dispersing this is going to take.
There's also the question of if this army will disperse when Anders is defeated.
Right, exactly.
I make that known. Like, we don't know. There's still a large question of we don't know how this army is really structured. We know that Anders is at the head. We don't know if there's sub-lieutenants, lieutenants, anything of the sort. We're dealing with entirely unknown in it.
Yeah, and I think Cahill speaks up and he says, "Perhaps it would be advantageous to us to dedicate some resources to finding that out. With the armies outside on the move, they would be easy to track and follow. And we have some prime scouts already at the East Gate. Perhaps sending a few parties to investigate that would be beneficial. It is always important to look to the next step."
Mm-hmm. But we need, for the moment, we need to know what our next action is.
Yes. So, and he kind of raises his voice so the whole room can hear him, right? And everybody kind of dies down. He says, "From what I hear, we have a three-pronged attack. From the front, most of our heavily armored troops with these ladders and perhaps this mercenary company will approach. They will bear the brunt of the assault. Or defenses, I should say. Next, from the east through the Garden District, we have a smaller yet still substantial force that will draw their attention away from the covert group from the north, who will scale the walls down and then perhaps be able to enter unopposed into the palace area. Now, while you will be able to enter the grounds of the palace, getting into the building is perhaps the hard part in this scenario. We know not what defenses they might have, along with the ones that are natural to Middenheim, if they've been converted to their cause. I'm afraid that most of the counts and countesses, they don't share their defense plans readily. Even I am at a loss for what might be in store for us. But I do know that this will be some of the hardest fighting that we have encountered. And I will stand by each and every one of you as we do this. I myself should be at the front, with the main force. However, I will leave it to other tactically minded individuals to place themselves appropriately. Unfortunately, and he kind of looks at you, Farron, when he says this, he's like, I do not believe our cavalry units will be any more than fodder in this fight, but I would like to have you participate still, Farron. You are a useful ally. But I understand if you must be with your people.
Yeah, I think I just nod to Cahill at that.
So, with that out of the question, we rely upon the hard work of the men and women who have served us for many years, both as civilians and as militia, soldiers now. Does anyone have anything else that needs to be brought to the table before we begin preparations? And with like the silence, I guess, that settles over the crew, he probably says, all right, we may disperse, but please, General Solomon and Lady Fairheart, will you remain for a moment?
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I think that a couple people who have, like, nothing else to do get up and leave. And I think that, Farron, it's up to you whether or not you stay or leave. Same with Aelin, but I assume, Aelin, you are at Bay Hill's side.
Unless told otherwise.
Well, you have free reign to do what you please. Although going outside would only enact the cult from finding you. So I mean, I don't know if you actually want to do that.
Yeah, I'm currently hiding out from them in this room, so
Yeah, you're just letting this go.
They're leaving me alone currently, so I'm just ignoring it for right now.
Our next arc is going to be fighting against Aelin's cultists.
Yeah.
Possibly, we shall see. So, the group at the table disperses, and Hannibal and Morella, as you're left there. He kind of looks to you and he says, kind of in a joking tone, he says, this feels like deja vu. Small units coming from the rear while the men and women take the brunt of the assault in the front. Is this tactic too played out, Hannibal?
It's a tactic. They never go out of style.
I will trust in your judgment then.
To be honest, though, they might see it coming. But it's a move we have to make. There's nothing else to do.
Yes,
They're
indeed.
holed up, and we need to force them.
I've asked you both here because I assume that you will be part of the front lines, be they over the walls first or through the rear entrance. But I ask of you, is there anything else that we need to do? Anything else we need to prepare? I have an ulterior motive as well.
I
think
raised an
that-
eyebrow.
I think that one of our concerns here should be well, besides Anders himself. But another concern that I have is what became of the Count. It was said as we were approaching that there was his head on a pike out in front of the palace, but scouts have not seen any. Think that perhaps this group entering from the north, they should perhaps be mindful that there is a chance, albeit a very small one, but from what my intelligence gathering has done, it seems as though the city was to be remained intact as much as possible. It might also mean that the leadership still exists.
So, what you're saying is you want us to find the Count.
Or at least the remains. Knowing most tyrannical individuals that have existed throughout history, they like their trophies. Be it one that is dead or alive. I think that if Anders is along the same vein, it is possible that someone in the leadership still exists. We have not seen anyone of that sort. None of the advisors of the Count, his court magician. In fact, even the High Priest of Ulrich we have not witnessed yet.
Oh,
Some of
I
the
think I
acolytes, sure. Yeah, he raises an eyebrow when you say that.
Yes, we found somebody murdered in the High Priest's room.
Ah,
I never met the High Priest, but chances are.
perhaps that was a preemptive strike. But, regardless, the leadership of this city remains in an unknown status.
I understand, Anders. Yeah, not Anders. Blue. KO.
Good.
Our group will try search. It won't be our... Depending on how things go, I doubt it'll be our top priority, but they'll have an eye out.
The top priority should be and should always remain Anders, but it is important to understand secondary concerns when executing a mission such as this.
I understand.
Remind me, Anthony. Wasn't the Count of this city a mighty warrior?
Indeed. It has always been of the seat of the White Wolf to be a mighty warrior. There are jokes throughout history that, well, instead of deciding via election, they hold a grand tournament. The strongest victor becomes Count. I do not know how true this is. I unfortunately am a little rusty on my Middenheim lore. But, yes, the most recent Count, I believe his name was Toblin. Count Toblin. He was renowned for his rather aggressive style of combat, even to my own ears. In fact, I heard my uncle say once that of all the counts in his provinces, Toblin would be the one he would not want to face off against.
I see.
Didn't we meet him?
No.
Mm-mm.
Who am I thinking of?
In the very beginning, before time, you encountered the Count of Nuln, who was Appleton. Yeah, Appleton.
Sorry, got confused for a second.
No, it's cool.
I also thought there was somebody with a T, too. That's okay.
Common letter in the alphabet.
Surprise.
Isn't it the most common? We're getting off track.
R. R-S-T-L-N-E.
Hmm.
Come on, don't you watch Wheel of Fortune, man? Come on.
No, I don't. I don't watch Wheel of Fortune because I'm not 80.
Oh, Wheel of Fortune's so good though.
I watched Jeopardy like a young man.
Anyway. Yeah, do you want to roll a history check, Marilla?
History check, you say?
Yeah, I mean you're a lady of noble birth who is the daughter of a count. You may know information about Count Toblin of Middenheim. In fact, they're essentially neighbors to you, right? The next closest like major city is Talabheim from here.
They should be. Oh, no.
I mean,
They're
you know the generic history here, right? Like you know that you've probably heard the same rumor that it's a battle for the countship instead of an election.
Inheritance.
Right.
Yeah,
or inheritance, right? Because sometimes it is an inheritance. Sure. And yeah, the men and women of Middenheim in general are renowned for their warrior
combat
prowess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're some of the strongest and most hardy men and women of the entire empire, and sought after for those abilities. So yeah, no, it is reasonable to assume that while your father is no shab
warrior
with a blade, the Count of Middenheim could be expected to be the strongest of all the counts for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know that almost categorically, the Count of Middenheim is devout to Ulrich. In fact, even if they weren't, they would say they were, because they would never be a count if they weren't.
Yeah. It's like a stipulation.
Yeah.
Prerequisite.
Yeah, exactly. It's a prerequisite to have some influence
Faith in
and or connection to the Church of Ulrich, for sure.
Yeah.
Or actually, it's actually called the Cult of Ulrich a lot, by a lot of people. Fair.
Yeah. So. All right then.
Cool. So yeah, I think kind of with that, he kind of nods and dismisses you unless you have anything further to ask or question. And I think that he turns to you, Aelin, and he kind of like, if you're sitting on the chair like next to him, he kind of rests his hand on your armrest, and he says, "Tell me, and tell me true. What are the chances that the Count is still alive? Or would it be possible if he were mortally injured to save him?" And you can tell that Cahill is choosing his words very carefully as he's speaking about this.
Elin clearly was looking off in the distance, thinking of something, and she finally focuses on him, and she says, "If one has faith, just about anything can be achieved."
He nods and he says, "Yes. Do you feel as though it would be worthwhile to assign, well, one of the devout members of the Church of Ulrich to this party, just in case?"
That would be wise, yes. I think that would be helpful for the given circumstances. But to be honest, I still don't know much about Ulrich.
Well, what little I do know is that he is a warrior god. Perhaps not the best suited for healing arts.
I certainly have plenty of... And she pauses for a moment. Devout of Shalia that you could take with you. And she kind of looks out towards the door as if they were waiting outside it.
Yeah, and I think he kind of nods and he says, "Yes. Perhaps sending one of your acolytes would be good. I wish only for there to be chance."
I would do it myself, but there's something else I really must deal with. She kind of like looks at him.
Yeah, and I think there's like the faintest eyebrow raises, and he says, "Oh, and what might that be?"
Something I should have dealt with a long time ago. It seems my sister has become too much of a distraction. I need to keep her out of your hair while you are committing this assault. She just kind of like trails off.
Yeah, and I think a troubled look passes Kale's face, and he nods and he says, "Yes, I am concerned as well that I will become not myself again."
If I have anything to do with it, that will never happen again. She kind of like stands up. She just says, "This is something I must do alone, though." She kind of like makes to make herself seem like she is resolved in this, but she's clearly still unsure.
Yeah, so you stand up to leave to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I think he sits for a moment in puzzled thought before, like, watching you leave, as somebody else probably approaches him to ask him something about something stupid, because as the leader of the empire at this point, he's required to deal with a multitude of things. Yeah. Like, somebody, in fact, the guy that probably walked up to him is probably a scribe and is like, "Sir, it seems like we won't have enough grain for, XYZ people today." And he just kind of like sighs and starts giving orders like he normally does. Cool. So, Farron, I want to get back to you, and Kree as well. So Kree, after you depart this meeting, Farron is probably close behind you. And Farron, this is the first time you see Noct.
Sweet mother of God and all that is holy.
Don't you, Michelle?
Kree looks around. What are you talking about, Farron? Oh, right. I know.
So I think like there's a dull like a dull hissing noise that comes from Kree, and little forked tongue flick, kind of in your direction, Baron. And you see the frills along the side of Noct's neck, or this creature, because like you don't know that it's Noct. Kind of like flare up a little bit and kind of look, and you hear like you're probably going to like untie Bernadette, and Bernadette is like the low rumbly grrr, like growl at this.
Oh God. Our pets are going to go at each other, like Clash of the Titans.
Kree starts petting the like hood on Noct's neck.
Yeah.
Calm down, Noct. Do not eat Bernadette. Bernadette, don't do it.
Yeah, I think you get the impression like Noct is actually looking at Farron, not Bernadette.
I don't want to scare Farron though.
Let's see, Farron. Is it too late for that?
Oh, it's all kinds of regret at everything in life.
Yeah, all of the regret is being had.
So, what has happened to Noct, and what is this new monstrosity?
I wish I could tell you. I summoned him back to me as I have before, and this is what he decided to be. This snake is very unlike him.
Is this because of that weird book?
I don't know. I don't feel anything from the book. I feel great. I even had a good night's sleep yesterday.
Yeah, that makes Farron even more worried. So, Kree, what are you planning to march with your lizard folk?
I'm going to round up the skinks and take them up the wall. They're good at that, and
Hmm.
I've been needing some off of frontline combat. It's wearing on the rest of my men.
Yes, indeed. The Bear Riders took a nasty hit in the merchant district.
Yes, we both did. That was some heavy fighting. Some great fighting on your men's part.
Thank you. And yours too. I saw they started to cause some mayhem across the way.
Thank you. Hopefully our men shall meet in combat again, but not against each other. I
Yes.
do not have a good feeling about that.
Yeah.
What about you, Farron? Are you going to stick with your bear riders?
Yes. I feel we need to look ahead to battles beyond, and we shall take our bear riders towards the north gate and prepare marching back home and what we may face along the way.
Then, by my will, the lizardmen riders will be with you. I think the bear riders have earned their trust.
And you have earned ours.
Good. Let's try and not scare some other people with knocked. Let's go. Come on.
Yeah. And as the two of you ride to wherever your destinations are, it's probably a good place to take our break for the night.
Mhm.
Okay.
So, we'll be back at we'll do a little bit longer. Let's be back at 10 after.
Okay.
Alrighty.
See everybody then.
Mhm.
Alright, everybody, we're gonna be back in just a few minutes. Please stay tuned. It's gonna be very, very just a few minutes. Thank you. See you all for the second half of Siege of Middenheim in just a moment.